Well, mercifully, the Predators' Western Conference road trip is about to end. Can they finish the trip on a high note tonight against the Winnipeg Jets? We'll talk about what needs to happen for that to happen. Plus, do the Predators have buyer's remorse? A national writer is raising that question and causing some debate in Smashville. We'll dive in today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On Predators podcast your first listen of the day. Every single day, we are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, want to start out with a special shout out to our loyal Locked On Pred heads out there, the everydayers who tune into every single show. We love you guys. We appreciate the support you give us week in and week out. I'll sip some water when my partner in crime starts talking.
Hey, y'all, I'm Ann Kimmel. I am a writer at the Hockey News, and he is Nick Morgan. He is a writer at Penalty Box Radio.
Thank you so much.
It's that morning.
Yeah, I must be a Nashville Predator on a Western Conference road trip this morning from how much I've stumbled. The Nashville Predators have not had a good time during their 2-week romp through Western Canada and Washington, the state of Washington. Shout out to them. But it all ends tonight against the Winnipeg Jets, a game that I think the Nashville Predators want to win for as much as making a statement as they do to kind of stop the bleeding in the standings right now. And so this seems to be important for a number of reasons.
I feel like there is a big difference when you are the Nashville Predators in the situation that you're in with a rebuild, with a new roster, with a new coach, new systems, all of that kind of stuff. There is somehow a bigger difference between coming home 1-4 and 2-3 than just 60 minutes of hockey. Like it just feels different coming home 2-3. And it feels bigger than a one-game difference for some reason. And I don't know quite how to explain it. I think part of it is an Edmonton win counts for more than one, but you don't want to come home with that being your only win. Like you've got to finish strong. You know, you want to finish strong. And this is going to be a tougher game to finish strong, I think, than maybe I would have thought at the beginning of the season. But here we are.
Considering the Oilers team is now second worst in the entire NHL, only ahead of the San Jose Sharks. Maybe that win hits a little bit different, but I think any win over McDavid.
Anyway, it's a moral victory. That's a moral victory. It's not necessarily statistically based, but it does feel good on a cellular level.
Yeah. To me, and it's just looking for something positive to come home to, because this has been a Nashville Predators road trip for me that has been defined by getting away from the way the Predators have wanted to play.
Right.
That Edmonton win was perfect. Like that was chef's kiss. The Preds were playing the way like Andrew Burnett wants to play. A lot of shots on goal, a lot of offensive possession, a lot of second chance opportunities. And then that Calgary game was just sort of, and Andrew Burnett himself called it one of the most disappointing games he's seen from the team this year in terms of effort. It was just a poor all-around effort. It was, they got that early lead, but never really looked comfortable with it. Calgary looked on the front foot the entire time. The Predators just kind of struggled to get out of their own way. And we've seen that a couple of games, during this road trip. That Vancouver one from a couple weeks ago, that was certainly one. And I think the Nashville Predators, more so than maybe the result tonight, although the result would be huge.
Right.
More so than the result would just be, can we get back to playing how we were in some of those earlier games?
Yeah.
When we're getting 33, 34, 35 shots on goal, when we're out shooting the other team, where we had the bulk possession. When you look at sort of the micro stats, and Philip Forsberg and Ryan O'Reilly have 70% of the expected goals for when they're on the ice against whoever they're out there against. Can we get back to that? And if we can get back to that, I think the Nashville Predators would consider that a good response. A win would be nice. Like, they definitely need to find a way to steal the result tonight in Winnipeg, especially against a Central Division team ahead of the Preds in the standings. But I think it starts with how they play. We need to see better effort tonight than we did on Tuesday.
I agree with you mostly. I do think that this game definitely is going to be a lot about how do the Nashville Predators play? How do they respond after such an abysmal performance against Calgary? So what are they going to do? And can they get back to playing with more consistency? And we've seen them have games early in the season where they played well, where statistically, they were doing the things Brunette wanted. They had the majority of puck possession. They were creating high danger chances. They were getting a lot of shots on goal. But we're kind of starting to edge into, the point in the season, maybe 20 games in, which we're not there yet. But like I said, we're starting to edge into it where it's not going to feel as comforting to say, well, we got the win in other statistics. Like, let's take that next step with this team and say, we got the win in the statistics, but let's get the win on the scoreboard. And so we've got to move towards that. So for me, this feels more important to get the win than maybe it did 2 weeks ago. But, let's see what happens. I mean, I'm not saying that we throw up our arms and we just quit if they don't get a win, but I do think it would feel like there's still forward momentum, because we really, as fans, feel like this team maybe was just taking a step back in that Calgary game, like a step back.
Fair. And, they are eventually going to need to figure out how to turn some of these good performances into consistent results on the score sheet. I agree with you there.
Yeah.
And against the Winnipeg Jets, maybe this is a prime opportunity for that to happen, because the Jets, even though their record has been pretty good, there's some holes on the team as well. They're not a good penalty killing team. They're not the best defensive team this year. They have some holes on defense. The one thing they're really, really good at is scoring. One of the best offensive teams in the NHL, which is kind of backwards from Jets teams we've been used to talking about.
That's
sort of
true.
the late 2010s. But one of the most interesting things, Anne, in the Jets lineup, Connor Hellebuyck.
Gosh, yes.
The guy considered maybe, one of the 3 best goalies in the entire NHL.
Yeah.
A lot of people say he's the best goalie in the Western Conference. People always have the debate between him and UC Saros. Not a great start this year. Only an .892 save percentage. A lot of Jets fans have noted that, teams are scoring goals that they're kind of used to seeing Hellebuyck stop.
Right. Yes.
And it's interesting. What do you make? Is this just a slow start for Hellebuyck, or is this him just kind of, maybe there's something else there?
I don't know, but it is, I think, definitely of note. I do think that this is something, I think Connor Hellebuyck is a goaltender who is certainly above average. I think of him very UC Saros, like, where he is sort of an X factor. He hasn't been yet. And you talk about, like, defensively, there are some holes. Is that sort of revealing something or leaving Hellebuyck out to dry a little bit more? But in going back and watching some of their games, you notice exactly what you said. There are goals getting by Connor Hellebuyck that you're like, there is no way the Connor Hellebuyck I know is going to let that goal get through. So I feel like it's something he's going to work himself out of, but it is really startling. It was really startling to see his statistics, because this is not at all what you expect from really one of the best goaltenders in the Western Conference for several seasons.
Exactly. Yeah. And if I was a betting man and I put money on it, I would wager that Connor Hellebuyck is going to start maybe turning things around here sooner rather than later. I think he's too much of a skilled goaltender.
Right.
to kind of have this happen to him. What has happened to the Nashville Predators this road trip, though? Of course, the Predators have not had success. What has been some of maybe the biggest issues keeping them from having success on this road trip? We're going to dive into that conversation in just 1 second. But first, I want to mention today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. We spend a lot of time talking together, you guys and I. We get fired up on wins and losses, who starts, who sits, and I'm thankful for that connection we have. And today I want our chat to be a little more personal. Whether you're on extended travel, bracing for a major weather event, or limited by yet another supply chain shortage, you are covered, my friend. Thanks to our partners at Jace Medical. Life-saving antibiotics and a long list of daily medications can be ordered in a 1-year supply, even ED generics for Cialis, Viagra, and other prescriptions. So go online right now at Jace Medical to receive your 12-month supply on your daily medication. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. A verified customer had this to say about Jace: "I am thankful for the service. Supply chain issues forced me to cut pills in 2 in order to take it. I ordered most of my daily meds with a year's supply. I also ordered an antibiotic kit. I feel secure now. Prices are lower than local pharmacies. I highly recommend Jace for everyone." So if you or someone you love would love to get peace of mind by having a year's supply of any daily med, go to jacemedical.com to see if it's offered for you. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. Well, of course, Preds game tonight against the Winnipeg Jets will be the 5th and final of this road trip. The Predators have lost 3 of the previous 4, including a bad performance Tuesday night against the Calgary Flames. And I'm curious from your standpoint, when you go back and break down the previous 4 games, particularly the 3 losses, what's kind of been one of the negative things that have stood out to you maybe the most?
First of all, I want to say Vancouver's just a really good team right now. I don't know. I think Vancouver's just that good right now. Seattle was a loss. One against Edmonton. Calgary, I don't know quite what to take away from that because it's very hard to gauge what in the ever-loving flagnog was happening with the Nashville Predators. But one of the things that I've seen that kind of makes me say, okay, a little bit more time may help this, is it feels like when the Predators start to get flummoxed or get a little bit uncomfortable or feel a little bit unsuccessful playing Andrew Burnett's new style of play, it feels almost like they revert back to what they used to do. And it's one of those things I think everybody does in their life. You know, if something starts to feel uncomfortable, you just tend to subconsciously go back to what's familiar, even if what is familiar is not great. And it feels a little bit like Nashville has done that, even in the losses, where it's one of those things where just stick it out. Like, you know, Vancouver was a really tough game. That's a tough team to beat, but it felt a little bit like there were little pockets of time where Nashville reverted out of what Brunette wanted them to do. And so I think time will fix some of that when that becomes sort of their default play, where they kind of erase the muscle memory of what they used to do. But that's been a little bit, you know, that's been one of those moments where, especially in Calgary, I'm like, yeah, you guys aren't doing what Brunette wants you to do. So that's been a little bit concerning, but I do think time is going to heal that. The other question that I hear people talking about is this line blender. And I think we need to address that, because I don't think what we're seeing is Laviolette line blender, John Hines line blender. I think it's a different situation that fans are just going to have to kind of bear up under for a little bit longer. But I do think that some of the swapping affects building chemistry with lines as well. I don't know.
I agree. And I agree from Andrew Burnett's standpoint that you want to give people different looks, and he's talked about it. And to be fair, the 4th line hasn't been the biggest issue for most of that. I mean, they were the one that scored the best goal against Calgary the other night.
Yeah.
But I agree that I think that Andrew Burnett is probably going to want to kind of find a combination and stick with it.
Mhm.
And I know that's going to maybe leave out somebody on the bottom. And I know like there's going to be a good player that, deserves looks that maybe you can't
Right.
necessarily find a place in the lineup for anymore. But that's just hockey. And you got to figure out, a way to win. To me, and I look at the top line and I see Ryan O'Reilly and Philip Forsberg. They're clearly the 1-2.
Right.
Who has been with them for this entire
It's been Gus Nyquist.
Yeah, it's been Gus Nyquist. Before that, I think Cole Smith was up there for, a game. Juuso Parssinen started out up there. I think there was even, a shuffled situation where Phil Tomasino for one game got some looks up there. And it's just kind of been this, sort of rotating. Colton Sissons was on there for one game. And it's kind of been this like rotating sort of
third
guest appearance. Yeah, like an SNL host or something like that. And to me, that is the biggest thing that I think Andrew Brunette really needs to buckle down and figure out. Who else is on that line? Do I feel enough with Nyquist there that there's solid chemistry there? Nyquist is a good player. I don't know if, we have seen enough to kind of be like, yes, that's the trio right there. And Nyquist is a good player and has good chemistry with Cody Glass. So maybe that'll shuffle again when Glass comes back. The thing like Juuso Parssinen, they had such good chemistry from preseason all the way up to, the first week and a half,
right?
When Parssinen started struggling a little bit. Parsonen's been struggling again. Do you maybe bite the bullet and say, look, and Alex Doherty brought this up on Twitter the other day, made a good point. Do you go back to what was working at the start of the year and be like, okay, like, Parson has struggled, but clearly this combination has chemistry. Clearly this was working early. Right. Do I need to keep these three together?
Yeah.
And maybe just let them work out some of the struggles themselves and not really be reactive and pulling people or moving people up if I didn't like what I necessarily saw for one game. Do you put those three together and be like, this is the three that I want on my top line? I need to give them a chance to kind of figure things out.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword in a lot of ways, because I agree with what you're saying. At some point, you have to plug somebody in there and let them work their way up into being with Ryan O'Reilly and Philip Forsberg, because here's what's real. I think you can put most anybody on that line, and for several games, they're going to perform well because they're playing with Philip Forsberg and Ryan O'Reilly. Who is the player that you're going to plug in there that eventually is going to grow into the player that is good for Ryan O'Reilly and Philip Forsberg back? And you do wonder, Juuso Parssinen, does he need a little bit more time to just work through that to get to that point? Can he do that? Because you hate to see a young player moved around like that. I think as fans, we hate to see it because we've been down this road before with Ellie Tolvanen. We've been down this road with Phil Tomasino. Like, this feels bad to us. So I think it's a double-edged sword. The flip side of it is you have to remember that Andrew Brunette is still getting to know everybody on the roster. This isn't like Peter Laviolette, where, he knew what he had in his veteran players and was just trying to smoke out the skill set of younger guys. I mean, Andrew Brunette is still learning who Philip Forsberg is and what he can do and what will mesh with that. So there's an element of me that's like, we still have to be patient because this is a coach that's learning an entire roster. He's not just trying to smoke out the skill set of Sam Fagemo and Phil Tomasino. He's trying to learn everybody. But there is an element of, at some point, and this is the time to do it. This is the season where you kind of can just let it ride, because y'all, expectations are what they are. This is a team that's not expected to make the playoffs. So if you're looking like, okay, this is a team that 2 seasons from now wants to be competitive, this is the season to let it roll. This is the season to let Juuso Parssinen skate up there and kind of figure out what he has. The other thing I will say about Andrew Brunette is he's pretty upfront about the fact that he did not go back and watch a lot of last season. He did not go back and watch a lot of the April games with these young players because he wanted to come in and form his own perception. So I think those of us who have seen Juuso Parssinen do, what he did in Minnesota with the shoulder shrug, we have one perception, you know what I'm saying? Like, we're like, oh, we know. And Andrew Brunette sees him a lot more and has come in with a different perspective. Not a bad one. I don't think he's disgusted with Juuso Parssinen at all.
No.
But, I think he's trying to rotate people through because he has to see more people. He does still have to see, what does Yakov Trenin do? That kind of thing. It's a double-edged sword for me, but I do agree with you. This is the window in time for the Nashville Predators where some of this stuff you can let ride because you're not going to disappoint fans.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think the Preds have to pick a direction soon. And maybe Andrew Brunette does need to kind of just see what he has in some of these guys and make a decision and be like, look, I need to let it ride out. Yeah. An interesting concept is that the Predators maybe have some buyer's remorse. This was brought up by a national columnist in a recent article talking about the Predators and some of their big signings and whether or not they should regret them. We're going to break this down coming up in just 1 second.
First, want to let you know this episode is brought to you by our great friends at Parkview Advance. As a business owner, you realize that there are just times where receivables might fall behind, but that doesn't mean you need to fall behind on vendor payments, payroll, or rent. For more than 25 years, Parkview Advance has helped businesses secure working capital from $5,000 to $1.5 million. Parkview Advance can approve your working capital in as little as 24 hours. It is a much easier process than you might imagine. We invite the many small business owners and entrepreneurs that are locked on NHL fans to learn more by calling Parkview Advance at 203-675-0071, or you can go to parkviewadvance.com. If your business needs working capital, call Parkview Advance today. Parkview Advance, helping businesses with their working capital. Again, check them out at parkviewadvance.com.
All right, Ann. One of your colleagues at the Hockey News, Adam Proteau, good guy, good national writer,
great guy,
well-regarded, came out with an article the other day after the Preds Flames game, talking about, are the Preds and Flames dealing with buyer's remorse? Basically, the concept is that they spent a lot of money on players despite them not really moving in a positive direction. And what he had to say about the Nashville Predators is that Philip Forsberg signed until 2030, Ryan O'Reilly signed until 2027, Roman Josi till 2028, and Ryan McDonough till 2026. Almost $29 million tied up. And basically he's just saying it's like, is that good enough for a team like the Nashville Predators who need to rebuild? And the quote he used here was, rewarding mediocrity is not the way to be a bona fide Stanley Cup contender. Trotz now has to be honest about the organizations, and they'll almost assuredly have to pay a price they normally wouldn't be willing to pay. Basically kind of insinuating that the Predators need to look at some of these big guys and maybe shuffle some things up here.
First of all, want to say love Adam. Great writer, great guy. Disagree. I disagree for a couple of reasons. I think it's very easy to say, hey, you have signed too many guys, too many quote unquote big guys to quote unquote big contracts. And I think when you're talking about big contracts anymore in the NHL, you're not necessarily talking so much about money as you are about term. I feel like term has kind of become the thing that people are more wary of. I think people would pay a little more money for a shorter amount of time than they would for a long period of time. But what you have to remember is when you get players like Philip Forsberg, who is coming off of a 42 goal season, who is waiting for a contract. He was 28 years old, I think, when that happened,
Yeah.
27, 28. When you are getting ready to offer guys who have sort of started to prove it to you, who you believe can be the spinal cord of a team, one of the things that those players are going to want at that age, they're going to want term. You're looking at, Philip Forsberg's wife involved in the music industry. They're not going to want to leave Nashville. You have players that have young children and wives and families that are, rooted in a community. They're going to want term. And I think it's interesting to me because I think in a lot of ways, term has become more valuable to players and more of a hot potato to organizations. So yes, I think 8 years is a long time for Philip Forsberg, but do you want him or do you not?
Yeah. That was kind of the big thing as well. And also when the Predators signed Forsberg, they were still kind of trying to build themselves up. They thought
Right.
they had something and they needed to go 1 or 2 pieces. The thing about rebuilds, Anne, is that when we talked about this before the year, you still have to have people to build around. You can't just get rid of everybody, bring a bunch of randos into the locker room and say, okay, this is going to be like Keanu Reeves and the replacements here. You need to have at least some sort of foundation. You need like the concrete on the base of the house you're remodeling to stay there. Otherwise, you have to dig everything up from the bottom and re-pour the concrete and do everything over. And that takes much, much longer. And that's much more of shakier ground that I think the Predators are willing to be in. So you need the guys like Roman Josi and Philip Forsberg to try to transition. And look, the cup is $90 million. 2 guys with $9 million contracts are not going to derail any sort of cap flexibility you have in the future. Ryan O'Reilly, like maybe you can talk a little bit more about that one. But at the same time, we talk about how important he is for kind of changing the culture.
That's it.
And the other thing is you're not paying him to be like, okay, we got him for $8 million for 8 years, and he's the guy that's going to lead us to the cup. Barry Trotz has been very clear about what O'Reilly's role is. Like, look, yeah, he's here. He's a good player. He's going to be on our top line, but he's also here as an example for the core of players that are going to hopefully be those 8-year, $8 million players.
Let's go.
The guys that lead us to a Stanley Cup march 5-6 years from now. Hopefully.
Yes.
He's going to be just the guy that leads by example and trains those guys up. Maybe the one thing I agree with, Anne, is and I feel your glare. We talked about it as it's just the Ryan McDonagh contract itself. Ryan McDonagh in the locker room, great piece, great player on the ice. The Ryan McDonagh contract, that's the sore point for me because he's still got 3 years left on it at just under $7 million. That is a big financial commitment. But Ryan McDonagh, the player, great.
No, I know it is a big contract. I get that it's a big contract, but you know what? Sometimes you overpay for what you need. And here's what I will say. Ryan Patrick McDonagh he is who the Nashville Predators need, especially right now. They thought they were buying him to add he was kind of like one of the last puzzle pieces when they signed this contract. Now we understand that Ryan Patrick is an edge piece of the puzzle. He is very important to this team. He is very important to a defensive core. When you look at, you've got Alexander Carrier, Dante Fabro right now, but you also are bringing up players eventually like Spencer Stastny, Mark Del Gaizo. You've got Tanner Molendyke. You have some young defensive players in the pipeline. Wouldn't you want to surround them with Roman Josi and Ryan freaking Patrick freaking McDonagh?
Yeah.
Yes, worth every penny. And I agree with what you're saying about it's not all or nothing when you are constructing a roster for a Stanley Cup run, it's like the end of Guardians of the Galaxy when Star-Lord says, we're going to do something good, do something bad. The answer is bit of both.
Yeah.
And that's how you build a Stanley Cup team. You've got to have a bit of both.
Yeah.
I regret nothing. I regret a couple of contracts, but not those. And not Ryan McDonough's.
Yeah. The contracts that I think the Predators probably regret most are sort of no longer on the books.
Are the ones they're still paying on.
They're still paying them, but they're sort of no longer on the books. Interesting discussion. We're interested to hear your thoughts on it. Let us know. Either comment on our YouTube channel or tweet us at LO_Predators. And where can people find your work?
You can find my work online at InsideThePreds.com. You can find me on Twitter X at ANK_Mama on Ice.
You can find me at penaltyboxradio.com or follow me on X at _NS Morgan. That's going to do it for us on today's Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Back tomorrow with Preds Jets recap. See you then.